Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and welcome to my boss spotlight for Rixxa Fluxflame. This is a series I started off with Razan. This is the second episode in the series. I'm going to try and get through all the boss fights in BFA, because there are some cool things and intricacies to all of these boss fights that people don't know, and that will really help you, especially as you start to fight them in higher level keys. So Rixxa Fluxflame is the third boss of the Motherlode. Notably, before Rixxa Fluxflame, you can actually switch your Azurite traits and your, talents and your build, your essences and everything by hearthing out after you kill Azurok and setting your Hearthstone to right next to the dungeon portal. There's an inn nearby for both Horde and Alliance. So you can hearth out and switch to a setup that will be better against Rixxa Fluxflame. And this will be notable later. I'll talk about things that you can swap to that will help you on this fight and on the last fight of the Motherlode. But for now, let's get started by talking about the boss arena that Rixxa Fluxflame is in. So obviously there are these 4 pipes all around the room, and throughout the fight, they'll fire at different times. One thing that people don't know is that they actually fire always in sequence. So the first pipe that fires is chosen at random from these 4 pipes, but then after that, it will always continue in a counterclockwise order. So if the red pipe here fires first and covers the red rectangle with fire, the next pipe to fire will be the green pipe, and then the pipe after that will be the purple pipe, and then the blue pipe here will be the last one, and it will keep going around in that circle forever. Again, the first one to be chosen is random, and then from there it will continue in this cycle. This is something that many people don't know even to this day about how this boss arena works. And then I've roughly covered in this image exactly where the pipes hit in here. So this is roughly the spots in the room that are safe and the spots that are dangerous as each of these pipes are active. Okay, let's move on to talking about the boss's abilities. One of the big things here is the tank hit the boss does. This boss does not auto-attack normally. This boss instead will shoot your tank for a big hit of magic damage, a very, very high amount of magic damage in a high key. But it is dodgeable. So some specs, like Brewmaster Monk, have a pretty easy time on this fight because they can dodge many of the incoming attacks. The attack is not blockable, normally, so Prot Warriors, for instance, have a hard time on this fight because they're just going to take all of these hits and have a very tough time withstanding that magic damage. So that's a spec that may be interested in hearthing out before after Azurok and switching to different traits and talents to be more capable of dealing with magic damage. Since block isn't helpful at all on this boss or on the last boss, they may want to swap from Bolster to Never Surrender. They may want to put on Azurite traits that increase their ignore pain value, that kind of stuff, and maybe even switch to the Memory of Lucid Dreams Major Essence for tankiness. Whereas specs like Prot Pally probably just need to make sure they have Holy Shield on, and specs like Blood Death Knight, Vengeance Demon Hunter, just kind of naturally tanky against magic damage, aren't going to have too much of a difficult time on this boss compared to, say, Prot Warrior or Guardian Druid. The next ability I'd like to talk about is the Asura Catalyst. This is shot by the boss at one of the 4 people in the group who is not the tank, and it sets the ground on fire in the same way that the pipes do. It's really important to note that this is always aimed at a player, so anytime an Asura Catalyst is about to happen, you should be aware of where you're standing and make sure you're not going to pollute important space in the ground. Normally, the strategy for this boss fight is to bait the Azurite Catalyst to the edges of the room, especially to the very edge of the room, because that'll use up the least space and just kind of makes the room a little bit smaller slowly, and then you can blow it away later on in the fight using a different ability. Dodging the Catalyst, usually not too big a deal though, it's entirely avoidable. One thing that is not avoidable is Chemical Burn. Chemical Burn is the big killer in high keys on this boss fight, aside from if your tank is dying to the tank hit. It is a very high damage thing that the boss will cast on the 2 closest targets. So when it comes time for Chemical Burn, the boss will do a 0.5 second cast and then apply the Chemical Burn to the closest target. And then after that, the boss will do a 0.5 second cast again and apply Chemical Burn to the second closest target. So it is deterministic who this hits. It'll be the 2 closest people. There's not RNG to who gets hit. And you can choose who gets hit and in what order they get hit by positioning intelligently around the boss based on where you want to be. It is also dispellable. It's a magic effect that is dispellable. So in a high key, you can have your healer dispel one of these, but the other one you'll need to do something fancy to live. So what are the options here? Defensives and healing them through it is the big default here. This is usually what groups will do in lower keys. In fact, in lower keys, they might just do this to both targets that get hit. In higher keys, this starts to become very sketchy. Outside of the best defensives in the game, like Blur or, Enrage Regeneration for Fury Warriors, this starts to be really difficult and they'll require a lot of healing at a time when the tank is also taking big amounts of magic damage. So depending on your composition, this may not be a viable strategy. Luckily, you can also use immunities on it. Many specs have an immunity that can be used. They can run in an immune, and that can take a lot of pressure off. They just need to make sure that they get hit if they're planning to use an immunity. You can also remove, with Mass Dispel and Revival, multiple debuffs at once. So Shadow Priests or Healing Priests are valuable to have on this fight. They can't Mass Dispel every set, but they can Mass Dispel, I think, every 3 sets they get a Mass Dispel. Revival obviously on a longer cooldown, although you could play Vision Major and try and make something cool happen there. I don't endorse that strategy though. Warlock Imps can dispel here as well, so if your Warlock is willing to have their Imp out, that's a big piece of utility. You can just have them dispel the dot immediately. Very powerful thing that Warlocks can do on this fight, but then you had to have a Warlock in your group, so, drawback as well as the upside there. You can use Vanish, Feign Death, and Shadow Meld. This is the trickiest, but very, very effective way to counterplay against this ability. So, you know how I said it's a 0.5 second cast? You can see when that's coming with a Bigwigs timer. Like, you can have a timer on this fight. It'll always happen at the exact same times. So you can have somebody under the boss or second from the boss and ready to hit their Vanish or Feign Death or Shadow Meld as soon as they see that cast bar on themselves. And if they have good enough reaction times, they can use this to completely negate the effect, because the boss will just stop casting and will not recast on somebody else. But they need to have vanished or feigned or melded before the boss finishes the cast, or it doesn't do anything. Usually the easiest way to do this is to be the second closest person to the boss, but that requires you to coordinate with your tank and the other melee. Your tank probably will get, or whoever's taking the first hit will get right under the boss, and you will get just a little bit further away from them, and then all your other melee will be max melee range. And then the boss will do the first chemical burn, and then as soon as you see the second chemical burn start, you hit your Vanish button, or your Feign Death button, or your Shadow Meld button, and you negate the chemical burn there. This is very tricky, but it's worth doing in high keys, because in high keys you do not want to be relying on defensives. You want to be having one of these actual answers for every single chemical burn. Other options here, Spell Reflect. One of the good things about Prot Warriors on this fight is that every other chemical burn they can Spell Reflect, which removes damage from themselves, adds some damage to the boss, and dramatically reduces the pressure on these other abilities to be used throughout the rest of the fight. Anti-Magic Shell from Demon Hunters also can get a lot of these chemical burns. As long as it's up before the burn is applied, the burn will not happen at all. Or if they mess up and it gets applied to them, they can use AMS to at least remove much of the damage. Much better, though, to make the dot not apply to them at all. Diffuse Magic from Windwalkers can be used to just send that chemical burn right back onto the boss, so that is powerful. And Havoc Demon Hunters can use their Metamorphosis ability to completely negate a chemical burn in the same way that Vanish, Feign Death, and Meld work. As long as they hit their meta while the boss is trying to cast the chemical burn on them, they will be immune as the chemical burn cast finishes, and they will not get the dot at all. This is very powerful, very useful thing that they can do, but meta is obviously a DPS cooldown, and again, this has the same timing restrictions as Vanish, Feign Death, and Shadow Meld, so it may not always be a strategy you'll want to do. Generally, if groups are going to use this, they'll do it on the first chemical burn so that their DH can get in their meta as fast as possible. And finally, Vengeance Demon Hunter's Conflict and Strife ability makes their Immolation aura cleanse this dot off of themselves. So if you're playing with a Vengeance Demon Hunter, they can Hearth out at Azurok and get Conflict and Strife and basically clear all of these chemical burns very, very easily. So this is an awesome thing to get. If you do have a Vengeance Demon Hunter, they can just Hearth out, put on Conflict and Strife, and cleanse themselves every single time they get a chemical burn. Very, very strong thing to do, but it requires you to do that Hearth out strategy, or it requires them to play Conflict and Strife for the whole dungeon, which they probably don't want to do. The final ability I'd like to talk about on this boss fight is Propellant Blast. This is aimed at any of the 5 players, and it will do high damage, very high damage in a high key, to anybody who's in the cone, and it will push them and any Azurite Catalyst on the ground back. This used to be bugged. It used to sometimes pull the Azurite Catalyst forwards. That looks like it's been mostly fixed. You do have to be a little bit careful here with this thing, though. You got to make sure that really the way that somebody is likely to die to Propellant Blast is if they get separated from the group. And so if they're far away from the group and Propellant Blast gets aimed towards them, they're not going to have time to get away from the cone, because of course the cone is wider the farther away you are from the boss. The important thing to do in this situation, like if somebody gets separated from the group by a pipe spawn or whatever, make sure that everybody else is not in the same cone as them, because If you bait towards them, they're likely to die. But if you have all 4 of the other people standing so that if they get targeted, it won't hit that 5th person who's out by themselves, then at least that person has an 80% chance on the first propellant blast to be safe. And then again on the second propellant blast, as long as everybody keeps baiting away from them. So they're fairly likely to not get killed in that spot. And you can even do a nice, clever thing and bait the propellant blast near them, but not on them, to help clear the way so that they can then get back to you safely. One weird thing to note about this ability is if it targets somebody who has like AMS up or who is completely immune, it will be very weird. It'll like still blow back, but it won't do the channel for the full duration. And it will be like invisible. So you do have to watch out for that. If it targets a DK with AMS up is the main time that I've seen that happen. Okay, let's talk about the order of abilities on this boss fight. On this boss fight, the abilities will always happen in this exact same order every single time for the entire boss fight. So you'll pull the boss, she'll shoot your tank a couple times, and then she'll put one of the Asura Catalysts under somebody. It's a very good idea to make sure you're baiting this Asura Catalyst somewhere unimportant while there's not anything else going on. Then she'll put out two chemical burns. Then there'll be another Asura Catalyst bait, and that will overlap with a pipe exploding. And then another chemical burn, and then a propellant blast. And then it will reset, and it will just keep doing this order forever. The main thing that this does is if you just consistently place your catalysts well, you can play in a pretty small area of the room. And because this is entirely predictable, entirely deterministic, and always on timers, predictably, you can have a very easy time on this boss fight as long as you stay focused, pay attention, as long as you're aware of which pipes are coming when. And again, if we go back to, let's see, where's this thing? Back here at the start of the video, this thing, you know that the pipes are going to go in a specific order as well. So as soon as you know that first one, the entire rest of the fight is pretty deterministic and you can know where you need to stand. So keeping that in mind is going to really help you in this boss fight. And it can be a very, very easy boss fight, or it can be a very hard boss fight. If you go in without a way to handle the chemical burns and a tank who's going to be squishy to the magic damage, this boss can feel unkillably difficult in a high key. But if you go in with a plan for all those things, it's quite easy. So a very good boss fight to know exactly what's going on in. Hope you enjoyed this spotlight for Rixxa Fluxflame. Do let me know what you thought of it. Let me know what bosses you'd like to see next in this format, and if there's anything I missed about this boss fight. I would, of course, welcome those comments in the comment description. If you liked the video, remember to like and subscribe, and check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Dratnos. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'll see you in the next one.